Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. And from your comments yesterday on the video yesterday, you guys are just wanting me to get in rant mode, I can tell. I probably will do that too. Oh my gosh. I don't even know where to start. Those comments from yesterday, I mean, many of them are very good, don't get me wrong, but many of them are somewhat thought-provoking. Well, let's just go. Let's start with business first. I got a number of things accomplished yesterday. I got the Bobcat oil changed, got the filters changed, and greased it, and all that good stuff. And in fact, I have an oil change tip I'm going to show you here in just a few minutes. Unfortunately, it didn't do me a whole lot of good to do all that because, well, you'll see why in a minute. I made the new casting parts for my aluminum casting, and a lot of the comments in there are about that, and a couple of them are very good, and a lot of them were the same thing over and over and over and over, like turning a taper. And turning a taper is easy on something short and stubby and, you know, certain size. You can turn a taper very easily. On something long and skinny, it's not too easy to turn a taper on that. I mean, you can do it, but if you had real good equipment, you know, a good stout lathe and all that, and I've just basically got a slightly better than a toy lathe. But here's what that actually looks like in my finished form. Now, it doesn't look like what I said it was going to be exactly. What I did was I turned the end down on this big piece of steel. I could have cut this off and then, you know, like welded this to a bigger flat plate or something, and this would be the base. But this is the base here, and it's solid steel, as you can see. And then my mold just sits over the top of that and will keep it from falling over. Now, this is long and awkward, and I know that already. You don't even have to tell me. But what I'll do temporarily is set this on a piece of steel and then put those angle magnets on 3 sides to hold it upright. So it'll stay still, and then I'll just pour my aluminum in there. Once it's cooled, I'll pull this off and hopefully get this apart or press the aluminum out or whatever. Again, I'm not worried about getting the aluminum out because I got a press and it'll push it out of there. I don't care how bad it's stuck. It'll push it out of there. But there are some good ideas about that, and I'll show you. We'll go through that in a little bit when we get into the questions and answers and comments and things. But anyway, that's what I ended up with. And the reason I didn't cut this off is because I don't know if it's going to work 100% for sure. And I didn't want to waste any more of this big, heavy, precious steel than I have to. This stuff is, to me, it's like gold. You know, you have a big block of steel like this, and I don't want to waste it because I may need it tomorrow to turn some major part out of. So I just decided to do it this way for right now, at least for the first test. If it works really well, I'll probably saw this off and then weld this to a flat steel plate, and then I'll be off to the races. You know, it's difficult to estimate how much aluminum it's going to take to fill this up, so I'm going to probably put more aluminum in the crucible than I need, and if I have more than I need, then I'll just pour the remaining amount into this. Now, this is not real smooth on the inside. This one's reasonably smooth on the inside, although it's not perfectly smooth either. As you can see, some rust and things in there. And I've worked it on a sander a bunch. I could put it on my lathe and try to turn it, but it's not a real super thick wall. It's by far thicker than that little conduit I was using, but this is still not what I call a thick wall. So I'm just going to try it because this was all I had. I couldn't find anything else any better. And anyway, just going to see how it goes. I'm not too concerned one way or the other. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else, you know. But like I said, I like simple. I don't like complicated. And a lot of the suggestions are good suggestions, but they're complicated. And I'm not going to go complicated until I have to. I go simple. And simple, if you can keep things simple, 10 times 9 times out of 10, simple is going to be the way to go, because you'll find that you'll be able to do it faster, easier, obviously, and generally it'll even work better because there's less to go wrong when you go simple. You should keep that in mind when you're doing projects. Try to go simple. You'll be surprised how often it works for you. Anyway, so that's the name of the casting project right now, but there are some ideas that we're going to talk about when we get to them in the questions and comments and things, and there's some good ideas in there, and we'll cover those. I have, I mentioned I did change the oil and everything in the Bobcat, and I really was going to show you something pretty dramatic. As it turned out, it's not nearly as dramatic because it took too long. I was trying to use my new, well, I don't even see it here now. Where did it go? Oh, the new GoPro camera. I was wanting to use this to film the oil change thing and show you this dramatic tip. And the rose of luck hit again, and it took me 30 minutes to get this camera going, and I still wasn't going. So I finally abandoned that idea. Well, by that time, 30 minutes of oil drainage had taken place, so this is not nearly as dramatic as it would have been, but it's still a good tip and still something I think it's worth showing you. So let me go ahead and show you the clip, and then we'll talk about it. Here's the clip. This has been sitting here draining for at least 30 minutes now. So I have got rags stuffed in the filter hole, and I've got a rag stuffed in the oil fill hole, and I'm going to blow through here, and I think you'll start to see more oil coming out. See, look how much oil's coming out of there. And I think that's a good thing to blow all that old oil out of the system. I think it's good for a tractor or a Bobcat or anything. If you're putting new oil in, get the old oil out as much as possible. Been quite a bit of oil come out of there already, and you would have thought there was no more oil in there since it wasn't dripping anymore. You can see it's draining out of there now too. So there's always oil left in these things, and I like to get as much of it out as possible, and it doesn't take much to do that as long as you got an air compressor where you can just blow some air in there. Okay, like I said, it's not nearly as dramatic as it would have been. See, what happened originally was, I let it drain, and I let it drain quite a long time. And it got to the point where it was just drip, 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 drip. Well, most people would say, okay, well, it's done, and put the cap back on it. Well, at that point, had I been able to show it to you, if the stupid camera would have worked, it took, like I said, it was 30 minutes later when I finally actually got around to filming that. But keep in mind, it was just drip, drip, drip. That's all that was coming out, I promise you. I had no reason to lie about these things. Well, when I put the air compressor on it at that time, it came out in full bore oil. I mean, there was a lot more oil came out, a lot more. And that's what my point is that a lot of times when you think the oil's drained out of something, there's a whole lot more oil left in there. And if you're going to put in fresh oil, that other oil just contaminates your fresh oil right at the beginning. Now, it's still going to do it a little bit because there's always residue. But this other side benefit of that you may not know is that there's sometimes sludge and very fine metal filings in that oil, especially in that bottom residue oil, and you're blowing a lot of that out of there too. And that's not going to get mixed into the new oil and then reground into your other parts. So the more you can get out of there, the better off you are. And that just ensures you're getting a full and complete oil change. I recommend you do that on just about any kind of a small engine or, tractor or lawn tractor or anything like that. I don't necessarily recommend you do it on a car, but under certain circumstances, you might even want to do it on a car or a truck. But it would just depend on the circumstances in that case. But anyway, it's it's to me it's worth doing, and it only takes a second. If you got an air compressor, it's not hard to do at all. Okay. The pond status. Let me just show you that. It's 6:45 this morning. I'm down at the pond. I did more bobcat work there, leveling out that pad and lowering the pad. I did a check this morning with a level and a tape measure, and we have about 4 feet of fall from where the water is falling out of that pipe. Presently, I think I can still get another foot easily, maybe 18 inches more. So the water wheel size should work, I think. I added a lot more dirt over here. So, I don't think we're in danger of the water going over the dam anymore. And we do have our low spot right there so that the water can run out if it's more than can go through that pipe. So we're in pretty good shape. Pretty happy with the way it's turning out right now. The dirt I put over there was really wet, so it was hard to spread and level, so we'll have to give that time to dry out. And we do have some more dirt, maybe a couple of dump truck loads of dirt that we're going to spread on top of this before we seed it. A little better topsoil dirt. But all in all, it's turning out fairly well. So that is working, reasonably well. If anybody's ever tried to spread muddy dirt, it's not easy to spread. It sticks together, balls up, and when you try to back drag it, it just grabs all of it and just pulls it. It's just, so that's what I was dealing with there, because everything was pretty wet. I was talking about the 4-foot drop there, and somebody, that's one of the comments that we will get to later. We'll probably address it again slightly later, but someone recommended or suggested that I also include the metrics. Well, I can do that when I'm talking in thousands of inches. I know what the metrics are there, for the metric system, but I don't know it in the large scale. So it just is what it is. You can Google any dimension. Like I do it often when I'm watching other people's videos and they say, well, this is 17 meters. Well, I just say Google, how many feet is 17 meters, or how many yards is 17 meters, and I have a rough idea. I mean, I know it's probably 15 to 16 yards is 17 meters. I'm just in that ballpark. So, I have a rough idea. But if you want to know exactly, you can Google it really easy. So that's my only suggestion on that. I probably won't be able to convert the feet and yards easily to the metric system as easy as I did at the workbench, because I know at the workbench, when I'm dealing in thousands of inches, I know what the metric equivalent is, believe it or not. It may seem more complicated to you, but it's fairly simple to do. Anyway, just thought I'd point that out. Now, in terms of that 4-foot drop that I have, that's that's what I have presently. I'm pretty sure I can get at least 18 more inches out of that, and actually I think I can probably get 2 feet more out of that. And that's a good thing, because that wheel itself, the iron wheel, is exactly 4 feet. So, if you put a 6-inch deep bucket on each side of that, you've added another foot. That's 5 feet. So it's a good thing that I can get, I think, 18 inches and possibly 2 more feet of drop out of the area there where I'm going to have the wheel. Because if I couldn't, well, then we'd have to have at least an undershot wheel, or we'd either have to have an undershot wheel or have the water dropping into the backside of the wheel, having the wheel turning backwards, which doesn't really matter, but it just wouldn't look as good. I think it would look much nicer to have the water coming in and falling down on the wheel. That's my vision I have, and that's the look I'm going for, and that's at least what I'm trying to do. And like I said, I think I'm just barely going to have enough room to do that, but I do think I'll have enough room. We presently have 112 viewers. I started to say 105, and it changed just as I was making that statement. So We have 112 viewers and a few comments down there. If you do have questions or comments or things you want me to discuss, go ahead and put them in the comments of today's video, starting with a bunch of question marks. After changing the oil and servicing up the Bobcat and putting the grease in it and the whole bit, just did the whole service to the Bobcat, this happened. My son's timing couldn't be any better. Actually, I'm being facetious because he's got my Bobcat and my backhoe loaded onto my trailer and my truck, and he's taking it over to one of his rental houses to work on the septic system. And anyway, he wanted to just borrow the backhoe, and I said it won't fit on your Bobcat because I've modified it. It has to go on this Bobcat. And anyway, so he has no experience operating that. In fact, I don't think he's ever operated it at all. I'm expecting to have all kinds of broken equipment when it comes back. And the other reason that it's, the timing really kind of is bad, because I was planning to use it to work on the water wheel project, and of course it's going to be leaving and I won't have access to it. Never fails. Yeah, it's not as bad as that sounds. I didn't even know it was loaded up on the truck till I went out there this morning. So I think at the time I made the video, I was like, oh man, that kind of reaction, but it's not as bad as it sounds. He's probably only going to use it today, and it'll probably be back tomorrow, and I can do it tomorrow. The thing is that the weather's really nice today, so I was expecting to get up there and work on that, but obviously I'm not going to be doing that today. But hopefully tomorrow the weather will still be good and I can do it tomorrow. Yeah, it's just, and I've already serviced it so that I could use it, but now I'll have to, re-grease it and all that when it comes back, or hopefully he'll grease it. He does that generally, so I don't know if I'll have to do it or he'll already have it done for me. But either way, just stuff that you deal with, Let's see, I think that's everything I had to cover this morning prior to the questions and answers. All right, so let's start down through the ones from yesterday, and we got quite a few here actually. Tom My Art Strong is the username. It says, seems serene at your pond. Have you thought about creating a platform or covered area for your guests to play their music? It's a good idea. I have not thought about that, to be honest with you, but might be something we'll consider for down the road. So if I run out of projects, I laugh when I say that, but if I run out of projects, we'll probably do that project. Leo Wall 01, could you be a little more precise about the difference in metric? Yeah, that's what he's asking for there, and I don't know that I can be that much more precise on that. It's just too cumbersome to take a metric tape measure and a regular tape measure and do all that. I mean, I may start doing that down the road, but right now, as of right now, the best I can offer is you'll just have to Google it. I'm not saying I won't do that. I think it's a good idea, and I would like to address it. I'm just not sure. Again, it's got to be an easy way to address it. If I can find an easy way to address it, I'll do that. So anyway, it's not a bad idea. It's just something I can't do at the moment. Aluminum soda cans contain an inner lining of plastic to extend their shelf life. And it just goes on to talk about that it's not that pure of aluminum. Yeah, I pretty much alluded to that they create more dross than they create aluminum. And yes, I'm aware of the plastic lining and all that good stuff too. I know soda cans are not the best option. I think I said that in the previous video. But they're also better than no aluminum. So, and since we have so many of them, and I drink a lot of soda, I mean, I'll just tell you right up front, I do. And so I'll just convert those cans into aluminum. And it'll just be a side benefit, even though it's not the best aluminum. And someone else also mentioned that I should use and we'll get to that here in a minute too. I probably should just wait, but they mentioned I should use, cast wheel parts and cast motor parts and things like that out of aluminum, put that in there. It would provide the best alloy. Yeah, I'm aware of that also. I've got extruded aluminum and I've got, that in the crucible right now, mostly extruded aluminum and a little bit of the can aluminum left over. And that's what I'm using at the moment. But I do have a few castings down the road that I'll be using, and I am kind of aware of all those kinds of things too. I've watched a lot of casting videos, and at least a half dozen people said I need to turn a taper in this. And yes, I'm aware of that also, that most casting is done with a taper. I totally am aware of it. I'm just not planning to do it right now. Again, because I'm looking for easy. And if, like I said, for me, easy is just going over to my shop press and stepping on the pedal and watching it push the thing out. I don't care how hard it takes it to push it out. That was easy for me. I didn't have to do anything except step on a pedal. You know what I'm saying? So I'm doing easy first, and then if that doesn't work, well, then we'll turn tapers. Because I am totally aware of that, what you're talking about, and I am completely aware of the sand casting, that it needs tapers also when you put things in, in a mold and all that. But there's still a better idea that's coming here that we'll get to in a minute that I think is a real good idea, and it is also very simple, and it's a really good idea. Jeff Knox, AZ, says you'll find the best results in aluminum casting by adding a few pieces. Oh, this is the transmission housing in cast aluminum. Yes, okay, so there's where that one came in. So thank you, Jeff. I agree, and I totally understand that. This one here, it was a suggestion from, I don't know how to say this username, IRSTAF6. I've seen his comments a lot over the years. Anyway, he's saying use just a threaded cap on the end, and and yeah, you could do that. But again, actually, that's even probably more complicated. I mean, if I had a threaded piece of pipe, it wouldn't be. But I'd have to thread this and then put a cap on it. But then the problem with that is if the aluminum can stick pretty hard, and it could be pretty hard to get the cap off, and especially if there's any threads exposed, the aluminum can get in the threads and then be hard to get off. This shouldn't be very hard to get off. It could still stick to this, and it may still be hard to get off, but I think I can get this off one way or the other. I'm not sure. Again, like I said, this may all blow up in my face, but there is still another suggestion coming about this, and I think it will make it easy to get that apart. There's just a lot going on here. Okay, so anyway, that was the threaded cap idea. Let's see. The next one is a couple of people suggested that you take the steel pipe and cut it off center and put the two together, and then you would have a full pipe. Yeah, you could do that. Again, that's pretty darn complicated, and if you're going to do it that precise, it's real complicated. But you could do it. I mean, that is an option. I doubt I'll take that option, but you definitely could do it. Yeah, and then there's several comments about the Rust-Oleum paint. Lots of people pointed out that it does not say liner on the can. Okay, no, you're right, it doesn't. It says truck bed. And it also shows a picture of a truck bed with this sprayed inside the truck bed. So, guess what? It didn't say paint either. It did not say paint on the can. It didn't say liner on the can. So what is it? Some magic formula? Those comments there, they don't make me mad exactly, but they really burn me in a certain way, in that you're trying to justify for this company. They didn't say liner on there. You're just calling it liner. Well, they didn't say paint either. But they show a picture of a truck bed, and they show this stuff coated their truck bed. So I'm going to call that a truck bed liner. Now you can call it truck bed paint if you want, but they sold it in the liner section, and I'm pretty sure that on the directions it talks about the being a truck bed liner also. I'm pretty positive it does. I don't have one of those cans handy because I threw them in the trash yesterday, and Sue's already taken the trash out, and the trash guy already came, so I don't have any way to look at the can. But anyway, I'm not making excuses for them. They're selling a product, and it's not what they're selling at all. It's not even similar to what they're selling. So, I don't make any excuses for that kind of thing. They're just misleading, and it's totally misleading, in my opinion, because it does say truck bed on there. Now, why would you want to paint a truck bed with any kind of flimsy crud? You want a truck bed liner if you're going to put something in your bed. It just doesn't make sense. It's really, really poor. And I can't let them off the hook, even though a lot of you want to let them off the hook. No, I'm sorry. I don't let them off the hook. And I hope they see the video. I really do. I hope they see it, because they absolutely are wrong to do what they're doing. And I will not let them off. So there's my rant. 26 minutes in, when your machine inside your pipe, maybe the machine in a little taper. Oh, okay. When you're machining the inside of your pipe, maybe machine a taper in. Yeah, lots and lots and lots of people said put a taper in this. But like I said, you could do it, but it's not easy to do on something this long, number one, because you got a long thing that's sticking in there, and it has to be really strong, and your lathe has to be really stout and, really precise and all that. It's just not easy to turn a taper. And also, this is not that thick a wall. If it was as thick as this wall, you could turn a little bit of a taper in it, yes. But I can't really turn a taper in this. I'm looking for that comment that's a really good comment about this. Well, here's one of them that's similar. It says, did you use a mold release agent formulated for casting aluminum? No, I did not, but obviously that's a good idea if you had some sort of a mold release. And that's where that other idea comes in here in a minute. And then somebody, says, that they know about foundries and you have to have a draft taper of 3 degrees. And yeah, I know all that too. So I'm aware of all that. Like I said, I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to go easy. And we'll see how it goes. And like, if it works, great. If it don't work, I understand the taper, and I'll do the taper if I have to. Jerry, maybe make some clay cylinders out of clay from the cave. That's an option. It's kind of a cool option, but again, it's a little more complicated, a little messy. The problem with anything with clay or any kind of inert materials like that is if there's any moisture in there, you got a problem. You don't pour molten metal in anything that's slightly moist. Now, if the clay's completely cured and dried, you'd be all right. But boy, if it's even slightly moist, you don't pour molten metal around any kind of moisture. Phil Taylor is saying, Jerry, who recorded your downloadable songs and who are the personnel on the recordings? I downloaded a set of 6 songs of yours a couple of years ago and absolutely love them. Beautiful sound, well compressed, well mixed, clear solos. I asked because I recall you recently said that you hadn't rehearsed your songs with your current jam band. It's not that we haven't rehearsed. We typically just, I'm not sure I know what you mean by that comment there. And what I said may have misled you. I don't know. I mean, we don't typically rehearse. We do them weekly at the jam. There's a lot of my songs I've written that they've never played. But the current band, we have not recorded with the current band yet. All the recordings that you get off my website were with my prior bands. Those are older recordings, and some of them I did in my own recording studio. Some were done at a professional studio in St. Louis. But the people playing on the band, The only one that's still with me is Leon on the banjo. All the others were from the St. Louis area, and they've either found other bands or just, when I moved down here, we just kind of split up. He said that he's heard some of them included the dobro. Yeah, the dobros were played by Leon, who is my banjo player, and another fellow. And again, I know his name as good as I know yours or my own, but I just can't think of it at the moment. It's terrible. It's a terrible disease. Don Grawler. Don Grawler was the dobro player on some of it. And then Captain Bubba, we're talking about a hard hat, and I said, I don't have a hard hat. Well, he says, don't you wear a hard hat when you're cutting your firewood? And because he's seen me in my videos, and I go, yeah, you're right. You got me on a technicality. But I'm not going to be wearing that light thing on my wood cutting hard hat. For one thing, it's got that wire visor that would come up, and that would throw the light off anyway. But anyway, no, I don't own a hard hat other than the one for wood cutting. You're right, I do have that one. But I definitely won't be wearing that light when I'm wearing that hat. So I threw all those hooks away, as you saw in the video. Those are gone. Here's the really good suggestion about this. This is the one that is the kind of thing I go for. It's the practical approach. It's the common sense approach. It's the easy approach. He says, try using the acetylene torch to blacken the inside of the pipe before you make your ingots. That soot will act as a release agent. Yeah, that's a real good idea. And I was already aware of that too. I just hadn't thought of it. But you made me think of it now. So thank you. That's a great idea. That was Donnie Hoffman 3258. Yeah, now that's the kind of suggestions I'm looking for. Those kinds that are practical, simple, and just real good ideas like that. So I'll give that a shot and see how that works. Having said that, the only problem I might have with that is that I don't actually have an acetylene torch. I have a propane torch. It's a propane and oxygen torch. And I do know I can get some soot out of it, though, and I'm not sure whether it's the oxygen or it's the propane. I'm not sure, but I do get some soot under certain circumstances, but not like you do with the acetylene. But I will still try that. I have a feeling it's not going to really work for me, though, unfortunately. But I used to have an acetylene torch, and I did get a lot of soot with that, but I don't think I get enough soot out of this one to make that work. But I'm going to give it a shot anyway. We'll see. But it's a great idea, though. Those are the kinds of ideas I'm looking for. Just something simple, something practical. Someone suggested using whiteout on the inside, and that might work. It'd be a little awkward and hard to get the whiteout in there and all that kind of good stuff. But whiteout's a decent idea. Maybe just paint. Maybe just something like that. There's probably other things I could think of that would work as a release agent. I just haven't thought of them right now. But I really hadn't even considered a release agent at all. So all of the people making suggestions about release agents have made me think. So I'll be thinking along those lines at least. So thank you for that. This next one is Poppy K 1431 says, when moving a new key, for example, a tune in D major, do you teach using the C chord shapes with a capo? Yeah, well, in bluegrass, capos are extremely common. Almost every bluegrass musician uses a capo. In fact, the only bluegrass musician I've ever seen that never put a capo on all night long was the banjo player Tony Trishka. I watched him one night up close and was watching everything he did, and he played for well over an hour. I'm thinking he played 2 hours. And he never once put a capo on that banjo. And he played everything from Russian folk songs to every kind of a music you could think of, and he never once put a capo on. So other than him, everybody uses a capo, at least that I'm aware of. And yeah, so we do show the C chord. Actually, in bluegrass, it's much more common to use the capo with the G chord. That's probably the most common, and you move it up and you go to A into B flat and those kinds of things. But people do it quite often with the C chord and the D chord as well. Like you can, a second fret and D chord, and you're playing in the key of E then, and fourth fret C chord, you're playing in the key of E. So I'm very familiar with that. Yes, we do teach it and we do show that. Cash, just incidentally, he was using a capo when he started coming here on day one, but he didn't know what it meant and he didn't know what it was for and he didn't understand it at all. So his previous instructor just really wasn't an instructor, in my opinion. Cash did not know that when he was playing a G chord, capoed on the second fret, he did not know that he was playing in a different key. He thought he was still playing G, but he was playing a G chord, but he was really in the key of A. So he's been straightened out on all of that, and he still doesn't know that much about that yet, though, I'll be honest. So we're still working on all of that. Okay, moving on to the next one. D. Blair 1247. Since you are a machinist, have you considered making a reusable clamshell mold for casting the aluminum? No, I haven't. Not at all yet. Again, I'm just trying to do real simple stuff at the moment. But I will probably, almost for sure, get into sand casting down the road and various kinds of mold casting down the road. Right now, I'm just doing this. I'm just trying to make things that I can turn on my metal lathe and make parts out of them. And really, that's going to be my biggest use. That's the thing I need it the most for, really. Let's see here. The next one is user FS3JU6FW8F. That's a unique username. Have you thought about what you're going to do with that tree so you do the shop edition? I don't know what that part. I guess when you meant to say when I'm doing the shop edition there, probably was one of those voice type things that didn't type correctly. Well, anyway, what the tree that's out there is not much of a tree when I do the shop edition. It's just a pretty much rotted redbud. There's very little good wood in it, and it's not big enough to make any real boards or anything. Having said that, I may still save little bits and pieces of it for possible veneer work or something like that down the road, but it's not very salvageable. Like I said, most of it's pretty rotted already, really. It needs to come down anyway. Yes, okay, the next one is Dale Childers. Yes, I worked construction for 30 years, and that's what they are for. So he's talking about those little things for the hard hat again. Yeah, lots and lots of people made the comment that is for the hard hat. So, okay, that same username, that weird username I mentioned a minute ago, it says, "You're not stupid. It might be a hanger of some sort." Okay. I guess he's talking about those clips again for the hard hat. Jerry, maybe bore a slight taper into the pipe. Yeah, okay. Again, for pressing the casting out. In all of the ideas about the taper are good ideas. I'm not knocking any of them. It's just that for me, they're pretty much unnecessary. Like I said, I've got my press, and I don't care how hard it's stuck in there. That press will push it out. End of discussion. It's never going to exceed 20 tons of pressure. And I have at least a 20-ton press, and if I really have to go bigger, I've got a 30-ton deal that I can put on there, and it'll make it a 30-ton press. So anyway, I'm not worried about getting it out, honestly. That's the last part of my problem. But the release agents are still real good ideas, and that'll make it even easier. So, and I probably will do that. Looks like Christia Thomason was the first one to sign in this, or the first one to question after we went live, or make a comment, I should say. And Leo van der Wal from Holland was second. And there's Newton Horn was third. That's Bo Horn from Louisiana, right? Bo, I get my brain sometimes. Albert O'Neill, he didn't put any question marks in front of this, but he says, I was wondering what your work background was. Well, my work background is I've never been unemployed a day in my life, and at least since the 4th grade. And that's the truth. And I know you probably think, oh, he's just talking. I'm serious as a heart attack. I've never been unemployed since the 4th grade. Anytime I was out of school, I was almost, I don't want to make it sound worse than it is. I would say, probably realistically, 50% of the time I was out of school, I was working. I'm talking about free time that you would otherwise be playing or something. 50% of that free time, playtime, I was working for my dad. Cutting grass, cutting lawn track, or cutting weeds, things like that, baling hay, hauling hay, feeding the animals, cleaning stalls. But I did a lot of, work too, just for my dad's landscaping business up until I got out of high school. Once I graduated high school, I went straight to work for Southwestern Bell. And I literally walked out of high school and basically straight into Southwestern Bell. I actually got the job working at Southwestern Bell Telephone Company when I was in the 4th grade, believe it or not. I actually got the job when I was in the 4th grade. I know you probably think that he just makes crap up. I'm not making anything up. I'm telling you, it's the black and white truth. My dad dropped me off see, all these people were super rich and had fancy places that he was cutting. We lived in the middle of all that, but we just lived in this little rundown farm shack, and all the neighbors, they had 6-car garages. Now, this is back in the 60s, you understand, and they had 6-car garages. They had maids and butlers and indoor-outdoor swimming pools and tennis courts, and everybody had this except us. We lived in this little crummy farmhouse, and we had 10 acres there that we leased, and we had horses on it. So my in with all these rich kids was, the horses, because they would come over to ride the horses. I'd go over and swim in their indoor-outdoor swimming pool, so that's kind of the way it worked. And I'm not making this up. Their maids and not their butlers, but their maids would make us lunch, and not everybody had a butler, by the way. In fact, only one house that I knew of had a butler, but quite a few of them had maids. And these were the kind of maids that actually, made your dinners and the whole bit. Well, anyway, so I grew up in that thing, and that's the kind of lawns I was cutting. So to get back to the story about how did I get my job working at Southwestern Bell, I was in the 4th grade. I was cutting Ray Shockley's yard. Ray Shockley was the executive vice president of Southwestern Bell in Missouri at the time. They had it broken into states at that time, and they had a president for each state. And he was the president of Missouri. The executive vice president of Missouri. I think there was only one president that was over all the states. I don't think each state had a president. They had the executive vice president, and that was Ray Shockley. Well, anyway, I never met the man. I swear to you, I never did know who he was or anything about him. But when my dad came to pick me up that evening, after I got done cutting his lawn and taking care of it, Ray Shockley corners my dad and says to my dad, does that boy want a job working at Southwestern Bell when he graduates high school? Well, my dad says, well, of course, yeah, sure. Well, nothing more was said, and I didn't even know about the conversation. 2 weeks before I graduated, my phone rang. He says, this is Ray Shockley. I want to offer you a job working for Southwestern Bell. I'd never met the man. I didn't know who he was. Okay. I said, let me talk to my dad. I'll get back to you, And he goes, okay. So I talked to my dad. My dad says, well, sure you want it. See, I really wasn't sure I wanted it because I had already kind of agreed to be a conservation agent. Now, that's a job I would have loved. I didn't exactly love working for the phone company, I'll just be honest with you. And eventually, when working for I hired in as a service rep, and I can't even tell you how bad I hated that job. I hated it. A service rep at that time was way different than the service reps now. The service reps now are rude, crude, and could give a rip almost. Back then, you were Mr. Manners. I'm seriously telling you, they spent 6 weeks on your manners in intensive training. It was just an unbelievable thing. It was a mess, and I absolutely hated the job. So anyway, I progressed and I got an outdoor service rep job. That's the one I was telling, where I told you about the story of finding the top for that mandolin that's hanging there. When I was an outdoor service rep, I would go out and talk to customers face to face, and those were much more severe problems and those kinds of things. But it was a really cool job. I had a company car and everything. And anyway, on my lunch hour, I would often go into hardware stores and stuff and look around, and that's where I found the board that I made that top out of, and I paid $1.50 for that board. So that top cost me $1.50. Well, anyway, making a long story short, so then after I had that outdoor service rep job for a year or two, then they promoted me into management, and I became a supervisor over the service reps in the business office. Now, this whole time, I was much more suited to be in plant, but I wasn't in plant. I was in the business office, and I was in customer service. But I always wanted to get into plant, which would have been, climbing poles, fixing stuff, mechanical stuff, installing phones, whatever. That's where I would have preferred to have been, but that never happened. Well, then in the early 80s, they came into the business office and they said, we're looking for management people that are interested in getting into the computer side of the business. And hand went up like that. I just instantly, because I always like to learn new stuff, And so I was, I think, the only person out of that business office that took them up on it. And so I went downtown, started working downtown, and I was designing and redesigning their systems for them. And had no background in it, never been to school on any of that, didn't know nothing about a computer, but I was designing their systems anyway. And I took to it like a duck to water, it went really well, and received another promotion or so down the road, and ended up designing their biggest system that they had in southwestern Bell, AT&T, and all that kind of stuff. So, and I was over 2 or 3 different systems at one time. So anyway, and then when I retired, I was in the general headquarters over the systems. So anyway, that's the name of that tune. So that's my background. But like I said, I've never been unemployed, not a day in my life. Unless you call what I'm doing now unemployed. But to me, since May 19th of this year, I guess I would say I've been unemployed because I haven't been working for other people. So I guess I'm lying at this point. But May 19th of this year, I considered that my real retirement. I am not working for other people anymore. So there you go. That's the whole story. Probably way more than you ever wanted to know. Okay, so let's get into a few of these questions here. We're running out of time, I'm sure. Paul Lanier, or Lanier, could be another pronunciation. Good morning. When I last melted aluminum in a crucible, we used a product that was pelletized flux agent to keep the slag at the top. Can't recall the name of the company that sold this. Yeah, I haven't looked into the fluxes and all that yet, although I did get some borax. I know that you need degassing agents and all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. Um, but on the other side of the coin, you can do it without any of that too. And at the moment, that's the way I'm going. I'm just going to see what kind of results I get without using any of that stuff. Again, going the simple route first. I'll learn as I do it. I know that. I know I'm no expert on this. I get it. But I also am no dummy on it either. I've already researched all of this stuff, and I really do understand all of the stuff. But you know me. I just don't follow the general pattern. The one thing that I think anybody that knows me can say for sure is I am definitely not a sheep. You know, and sheep are typically they see the sheep in front of them, and that's it, and that's all they see, and they follow that sheep. And if you've ever seen a flock of sheep, that's how they work. You can run a bunch of sheep, and if one sheep happens to jump at a certain place, doesn't matter what's on the ground at all. The next sheep in line will jump at that same place. This is a real life thing. This really does happen. I'm not making this up. So what I'm pointing out here is I don't think like the sheep in front of me. I think like me. And you know, I look at everything with fresh eyes, if you will, and I go, well, that's how everybody else does it, but this is the way I'm going to try it. And often I come up with something way easier, way better, or way simpler than the guy in front of me. So that's just so you know. I'm not picking at you here, Paul, at all, because I do know about this, and I've got it in the back of my mind, and I even went ahead and bought some borax in case I needed to use it for some degassing or something like that. But I'm not going to do any of that yet. I'm just going to see how it goes and see what I can find out about it. You know, I'm not just taking somebody's word for it, in other words. David Hurd. Hi, Jerry. My late father's 42 Gibson Banner has 80 years of grime on it and white haze in small areas. What would you recommend to get it looking good again? I appreciate you and your channel. Gibson Banner. I'm not sure what that is. That's a particular type of guitar, I guess. I don't know what a Gibson Banner is. That's my first problem. So, David, maybe if you could expand on that, that might help me. But if it isn't, if it's a musical instrument, I start easy first. And again, you want to test anything, even water. You want to test it on an instrument because sometimes water will actually melt your finish. It depends on what kind of finish it is. So, whatever you do to it, David, test it. Make sure you test it in a small, non-conspicuous area. And but I think in general with instruments, and this is just in general, I would take just a drop of dish soap and, you know, in quite a bit of water, and then just lightly clean it, and then clean it with completely fresh water, and just clean it with water first. Generally, again, test it first. And then wipe it down really dry. Now, if that didn't clean much of it, then one of the things I like to do, and typically if they're really old, like 80 years old type things, then I take, because I know it generally won't hurt it, no matter what kind of finish or anything, is to just take like boiled linseed oil, put it on a rag, and then wipe it in. And if you rub it really hard, a lot of times that will actually clean it too, believe it or not. And it's good for all the little scratches and places where the finish is popped off and all that. So the boiled linseed oil is a good thing to do regardless anyway. So, and if you rub it in really good like that, it'll often will clean it. Those are the two safe things that I can pretty much tell you to do. Beyond that, I don't know. I'd be a little leery on just saying to try something else. But those two things are fairly safe and generally work pretty well. And the boiled linseed oil, even if it is kind of yellowed or white haze or whatever, will often make it look good. Now, the white haze, again, you might be able to buff that off with with the semi-chrome polish is another option, but that really depends on what the rest of the finish looks like. If the finish is really kind of stringy, crackly and all that, then I probably wouldn't use the finish. I mean the polish on it. I probably wouldn't do that. Another thing that can get rid of white haze under finishes a lot of times, and I'm not necessarily saying this will work on this case, but I'm just kind of talking in general. But if you have an instrument that has a good, decent finish on it, but there's a white haze under it, if you take a hairdryer and then just gradually increase the heat and gradually increase the heat, but you want to be careful. You don't want to blister your finish. But you get enough heat on it, a lot of times that white will go away. So those are just options there, and you just want to be really careful with anything you do on those kinds of things. Newton Horn, is your drinking water from a spring? No, it's from a deep well, which in kind of a sense is a spring. I mean, when you're taking water from a deep well, it's basically underground water flowing, which is essentially a spring if it comes out of the ground. So, but no, our drinking water itself actually comes from a deep well. It's generally safer to get water that way than it is out of a spring, because there are freshwater flukes and different bacteria and different things that can be even in the best spring water. But if you're out and you're stuck, spring water is by far your best option. If you're dying of thirst, that's your best option, rather than, like, say, drinking out of a pond or drinking out of a mud hole or something like that. Spring water is by far your best choice, by far. And that's why I think I'm finding that Civil War relics and stuff here is because there's, I don't know, I don't want to overstate it, but there's at least a half dozen springs in this valley, in just my valley. So it would have been a good reason why the troops and things would have come through here. It's because of all the springs. Anyway, then the next one, Leo Vanderwall, I think we mentioned earlier he was from Holland. He's got one here, and it just scrolled and I lost him. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So the wheel will be located nearby the spring or nearby the creek. Yeah, the spring, okay, it's hard to explain now, but you come in those two white pillars in my farm. You come in my driveway. Well, as you're coming in the driveway, heading this direction, the spring house is on the right. There's water is coming out inside that house. And then it flows down through under the road that you just drove through, and it goes out a pipe, and it falls into the pond, basically. And so that pipe coming out under the road there is approximately 6 feet higher than the actual water level. Presently, I'm about 4 feet in the dirt below that pipe, presently. And I'm going to have to go down another 18 inches in order to make that water wheel work with an overshot, water. So anyway, I hope that's clear to you, Leo, there. But you'll see it in video form as we get closer to it. Gary Smythe from the UK. Jerry, have you ever thought about doing a video of your entire life history, including all your employment? I, for one, would find a series video of your life extremely interesting. Well, thank you, Gary. No, I haven't really thought about doing anything like that. I've kind of told you guys pretty much everything about me already, so I'm not sure there's anything left to tell, really. But thank you. Michael Newman. Hi, Jerry. I'm thinking of buying an air brush and compressor to spray an electric guitar body. Have you any tips or advice? Yes, I do. Yeah, that's a good question, and yes, I do. All right. Well, airbrush wise, I don't know that I'm an expert on that. I have a good one. I would recommend that you try to get a good name brand one on your airbrush. I don't have too many comments on the airbrush, to be just truthful. Paz, I think Paas or something like that makes a good, or Pash maybe it is. I think it's Pash, makes a decent one. So other than that little bit of information on the airbrush, I can't really help you much. But on the compressor, and this goes for any kind of air compressor, and I mean any kind. And despite all the marketing hype and all the crud that you're going to see out there on air compressors, I'm going to tell you right now, and you can take this to the bank, and I got no reason to lie about it because I get nothing out of it. I'm not going to be better looking. I'm not going to live longer by telling you this. I'm just telling you because I know it to be a black and white fact and black and white truth. And that is, buy an air compressor that needs oil. Do not fall into the marketing hype and buy the air compressor that is oilless. That's the whole hype these days. This one's oilless. You don't need oil for this one. And it won't last, and it makes 10 times as much noise, and it's 3 times slower. And it's just a black and white fact and truth. Now, I'm not saying every single one of them is that way. What I'm saying is, in general, your oil-filled, or the ones that require oil, air compressors, they're going to run quieter, they're going to last way longer, and they're going to also get up to their pressure much faster. So be sure. Now, if you're planning to just buy the little hobby air compressor, I can't really help you with that. If you're just buying the one that's sized for an airbrush, I can't really help you with that. I'm just being honest. But if I were you, if you're going to buy a compressor anyway, just buy a good compressor. Just buy one. That way you can use it on your car tires. You can do a lot of things with an air compressor. You can blow out your shop. You can do all kinds of things with an air compressor. But don't buy one that is oilless. I can't speak to the ones that are made for the hobby of airbrushing specifically. I can't really speak to those. But if they have an option of an oiled one or a non-oiled one, get the oiled one. I guarantee you. How do I know this for a black and white fact? Well, first of all, right now, presently, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I know for sure I have 4 air compressors. And I had several others. And all of the others that were oil-less, they're gone because they didn't last. The ones that are oil, I've had the one for 40 years at least, and it still works just fine. I rest my case. So there's a public service for you on air compressors. Do not buy the one that is oil-less. And you might say, well, mine works just fine. Yeah, it works just fine. But use it a little bit and see how long it lasts. And also compare it to one that uses oil and notice the difference that it has on your hearing. Oh my gosh, those oilless ones are so stupid loud, and they're slow as heck. So anyway, there you go. Michael Newman. Hi, Jerry. I am thinking of buying... Oh, sorry, that's what I just did. Okay, that just scrolled all the way to the top now. Dan Lancy. Only cut one side of the pipe, clamp it with a hose clamp. Oh, that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea, Dan. Again, that's a practical idea. The only problem with that is cutting it. I mean, you could just cut it with a disc, a grinder disc. You could do that. But, on a long piece like that, it's a little tricky to cut. There's ways. I've got ways I can cut it though. But again, that's a pretty good idea. And then clamping the cut shut. So I like that. Again, I like those kinds of practical ideas. Good idea, Dan. May have to go to that down the road. Alonzo Quesada. Hi, Jerry. Been watching people taking apart violins, especially Olaf, the violin maker, and noticed lots of cleats being used inside really old instruments. When too many cleats is too much. Well, Alonzo, I don't have a problem with cleats overall, and I did use a lot of cleats in my time as a luthier, but I have a general rule of thumb on cleats, and that is if you've got a decent amount of surface area and there's no stress on that spot, I doubt you need a cleat, as long as you got a decent amount of surface area. Now, if it's a really, really thin surface and it's broken, then you probably do want to cleat it on the inside. Or if it has a lot of stress on it, you probably do want to cleat it. Now, you might say, well, what do you base that on? Well, I base it on just a couple things. First of all, 40 years experience. Second of all, think about it. Every guitar, every violin, every mandolin, pretty much in the whole world is made with a multi-piece top, at least a two-piece top, and that joint generally doesn't come apart. Now, it does on those ones that were glued with hide glue, but if you glue them with a modern glue, they don't almost never come apart, and they don't have much surface area either. My point is that center joint stays together, and it doesn't have cleats. So, if you just base the reality on common sense, for the most part, that's going to tell you everything you need to know. But so cleats are fine, but too many cleats, is going to affect the sound to some degree. I mean, obviously, that's why it was carved thin to begin with. And if you go thickening it back up with a bunch of cleats, you've kind of defeated the purpose of the carving. So I do use cleats. I use them under high stress situations and places where you just don't have enough glue surface area. So that's the best I can tell you on it. As far as when there's too many, I don't know, but I'd probably know it if I saw it. He's got another question. And is there any other way besides cleats to stabilize cracks on an instrument top? Not really. Try and think about that a second if there's any other options I can think of. Just a good modern glue. If you use hide glue, well, good luck to you. That's all I can tell you. Hide glue works for a while, but it will come loose eventually. That, you've heard me say, holds initially, delaminates eventually. That's what hide stands for. Holds initially, delaminates eventually. And hide is spelled H-I-D-E, by the way. It's not H-Y-D-E, to romanticize it, to make it sound like it's cooler than something else. Hide glue is just animal hides that were boiled down, and the sticky stuff in there sticks stuff together. It's kind of like using bubble gum to stick stuff together. It holds initially, but it's going to come apart eventually. Period. End of discussion. Believe what you want. You can tell me I'm all wet and that all the good makers use hide glue. Go ahead and tell me that. Like I said, I'm not a sheep. I don't follow the guy that sheep in front of me. I don't jump when he jumps. I do what common sense says is the right way to go. And I guarantee you 1,000%, if Stradivari were alive today, he'd look at these guys using hide glue now and going, what the heck's wrong with you people? Don't you realize there's a lot better glue out there now? Because he was a smart man, and he used the best of everything he could get his hands on back then. And he would do the same today. Why wouldn't he? Yeah, there you go. All right. You loved it. You love it when I get on these rants. Jeff Puris, good luck to you and your son digging around the septic system. I'm not going to be digging around the septic system, although I've done it many times. You know what Art Carney, as Norton said, all that glitters down there ain't gold. Yeah. I have dug a lot of septic systems in my life, believe it or not, more than one or two. So anyway, I've done. You'd be really hard pressed to name some practical work thing that I haven't done. You'd be really hard pressed to name something that I haven't done. I really believe that. I may be giving myself too much credit, but I honestly don't think very many of you could name something that I haven't done. Well, I haven't used hide glue much. Mike Soba. Jerry, aircraft aluminum is heat treated, making it much harder. Will your aluminum be soft after you smelt it or not? Well, Mike, those are some of the things I'm going to be learning as I go. I know that some of the properties will change and can change, but the truth is I don't really know yet. So I don't know the answer to that, honestly. But I imagine I'll be finding it out. Jarvis Wilkins, please teach about bridge dynamics, how the string should approach the back of the bridge and how it leaves the front of the bridge. Okay. I'm just trying to think of what I might say and how I might say it. Well, first of all, I'm not speechless. I'm just trying to think because it's such a big topic and there's so many things you could say about it. First of all, it would, of course, depend on what kind of bridge you're talking about. Are you talking about a bridge that's glued down or a movable bridge? In either case, you want a bridge that fits really well to your top. You don't want air gaps. You want everything to transfer the sound the best. You want to use good quality material in your bridges. See, you got to remember, and this goes back to what I have criticized different guitar companies about, is they use crummy material in the most critical area of your instrument. The most critical area of your instrument is the bridge and the saddle. That's the most critical. You can talk about your nut and your tuners and all that stuff and call that critical, and it ain't nothing. It's not that much compared to the bridge and the saddle and the bridge plate area. That's where everything happens. That's where your sound comes from. That's the important place on your instrument. So you want quality materials. You want everything meeting up perfectly. You want everything. You don't want no air gaps. That's why it's so dumb when these companies, glue their bridge down over the top of the edge of the finish. There's an air gap there. That finish, it's not very much, but it's 3 to 4 thousandths of an inch thick. It's the thickness of a piece of paper. Your bridge isn't touching your top. It's sitting on the finish by 3 thousandths of an inch. And you think, oh, it's not that big a deal. It's going to press together. No. Did you see the trick that I've shown you where you put the cellophane tape on here, which is about 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch thick, and you put the cellophane tape and you scratch the surface of your finish? The center blade where it's exposed never touches your finish. And that's only 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch thick. I rest my case that you want your bridge fitting to your top. And you want it glued well, and you want it clamped really well, and you want to use good materials. So those are the most important things about your bridge. Now, as far as the strings go, it's kind of similar in that you want a good attachment point, and you want to make sure that the nut is pulled up tight against your bridge pad, and you put your pin in, and you want to make it good and solid. You don't want to have slack in there where it can be gradually pulling over time. Your saddle is the most critical part of your string thing. Your saddle is by far the most critical part of your string meeting up to your bridge. and I'm exaggerating, but your saddle is cut at an angle like this. Your string comes up from over the top and comes off this. The last place your string touches is that front edge of the saddle. Let me rephrase that. That's the place where it's supposed to be the last place it's touching. If it's coming off of your saddle back here and then still going across here and not touching, you're going to get buzzes and weird sounds coming off of that. So your string should touch right there on that last spot on your saddle. That's the most critical thing about it, because it really will create a fuzzy sound, a muted sound, a dull sound. It will not be your full, clear, crisp sound unless your saddle is cut perfectly right. Now, I know a lot of saddles are cut with a dome like this. I mean, kind of a round top, and your string comes across there. Those are generally okay because the dome is on both sides and the string just touches that high point and you're good for the most part. But I prefer, for intonation purposes, especially when I'm doing the intonation myself, I'm not necessarily talking about a guitar that came fresh out of the factory. I'm talking about when I'm doing this myself. If I'm putting a bridge on and putting the saddle on, I want that saddle cut at an angle, and I want that front edge to be my intonation point. And I want to adjust it and get it right, and then glue it down in that spot when the intonation is perfect, or is as near perfect as you can get. I don't know if those are the things you wanted me to talk about, but those are the things that I find are the most important on a bridge and saddle. Using super good materials is just critical. Why would you glue plywood in there for a bridge pad? Oh my gosh, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen companies do. And you've seen them go full circle on that. I hate to mention any names, but some of the bigger guitar companies, they were using good materials, and even materials that I thought were just marginal, like maple, they would use that, which is better than plywood, but it's still marginal. And you say, well, violins are made out of maple. Different technology, different purpose, different things are happening there. You want to use the most quality material you can put there. And the most quality material you can put there is something like rosewood, ebony, some high quality wood that's going to ring and create vibration and tone. I like to use Padauk. Padauk's one of the most resonant woods I've ever found. So for that bridge pad. I'm going to get off that little soapbox, but I hope that helps you there, because those are the things that are most important to me. All right, we're about out of time. Well, we're more than past our time, but there's just a few more questions. I'm going to try to get to them really quick. Michael 2X, do you still offer guitar setup for rental retreat visitors? No, I've decided I'm not going to do that. But if you want to bring an instrument here and have me evaluate it and just tell you what I think it needs and things like that, I'll be glad to do that. Or I'll even be glad to show you how to do some of the work yourself. I mean, I'll show you how, but I'm not necessarily going to do the work. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at on that. Eddie Turner, the honeydew list keeps me from being unemployed. Yeah, you should be married to Sue. Oh my God. Whew. I'm sure I'm right there with you, at least, if not surpassing. And again, I don't know why this has started doing this, but a lot of these comments, the half of the word from another comment and is over half of a word from another. It's started doing that recently. I don't know what's causing that. I can see the word Vulcan salute or something like that above Zappa's comment here. Zappa seems like it happens on your comments a lot. Maybe it's something to do with your side. Anyway, but I can sort of read Zappa's comment under those words there. Now that word above Zappa's has changed. That's weird. Anyway, I'm trying to read his comment. It says, see Jerry Bridge Dynamics whiteboard. Oh, that I could use a whiteboard to show, yeah. Well, you're right. I probably could use a whiteboard. But I'm Italian. I like to talk with my hands. Eric Howell says, I don't know how long they will last, but California oilless air compressor is quieter than any compressor I've ever heard. Look up on YouTube. Well, it might be, Eddie. Eric, I don't know anything about that specific thing. I'm talking in general terms, and I know from experience, and I know because I've got a lot of air compressors, get one that needs oil, and you'll be happy. What's the big deal? You put oil in it one time, and for pretty much for the rest of your life, you'll never need to put oil in it again. I mean, that's pretty much the way it's worked with me. I check the oil in them, but hardly ever do you need to put more oil in them. It's like, so what's the big benefit of having it oilless? It's just that one-time shot that you got to put some oil in it. Big deal. Okay, I'm done. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We got 129 viewers at the moment. I probably made some people mad today, but I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make anybody mad. But I still feel very strongly about the bed liner stuff. Yeah, it didn't say bed liner. You're right. It didn't say liner. It did say truck bed, but it also didn't say paint. And it showed a picture of a truck bed with this sprayed all inside it. I call that a truck bed liner myself. I don't let them off the hook. So Rust-Oleum, you should hang your head in shame. We will see you on the next video. I will try to get the smelting video out this weekend. We'll see you then.